Hello and welcome to our little interview series about the creative voices behind the cult Kickstarter Dark Realms and Other Horrors. Just initially, the campaign is still live and will close on Friday, November 28th, 2025, around 6 p.m. Central European Time. I'm David. I'm one of the organizers of the Illusion Horror and Con, and I'll be speaking today with Stephen Wall, who is one of the writer and talented lictors who create these fantastic stories that we're now seeing in the Kickstarter coming up.
Thank you so
I
much.
just, yeah, that is fantastic to have you. And I just want to mention that this series kind of wants to give a bit of insight into the creative processes of the writers, their inspiration, their challenges, and maybe kind of what they experience as cult writers are as well.
Hmm.
We do want to note that these materials that we discuss are currently still evolving in a creative process, so they're still being edited and might be subject to change what get in the final product. And I think with that, I just want to say thank you again for joining us, Stephen. And we'll just dive right in with a brief introduction of who is this Stephen Wall that we're talking today with.
Oh, well, hi. Yeah, my name is Stephen Wall. I am a an American who has resided in Canada for about 15 years now, and I attended Memorial University as a graduate student. I obtained a graduate degree in folklore, and so that's kind of my background. And as far as who I am outside of that, I think that I've always wanted to write uh, tabletop role playing material. I think that that has something that has kind of loomed in the background for me. I think that if anything, I tried to push it away and move toward other avenues, but I think it caught up with me. It eventually it was who I was meant to be. So that's kind of how I ended up in this situation. Writing for Kult, I have a small imprint, a small publishing imprint called Delapore Media that I'm currently working on producing a variety of material through and speaking on behalf of. And yeah, that was actually how I ended up meeting Gabe and Peter, um, the uh, the folks behind Cult, and and getting involved in this project and other projects.
Fantastic. You said you always wanted to write. What's kind of the initial inspiration for writing for TTRPG?
Well, I mean, I was definitely I was a player and a game master starting back when I was 11 years old. I mean, that's 34 years ago now. But I think expanding kind of beyond that scope and working into the avenue of writing, I think that that was something I wasn't really ready for until I hit a certain phase of my life and just realized that yeah, I have these ideas, they need to go somewhere. And it's not just it's more than a hobby. It's something that I want to do. It's a contribution to culture that I want to make, such as it is. I mean, it's where I want to make my mark.
Mhm.
So that was my intent. And I started with a blog, kind of putting my ideas out there almost as kind of like a I guess an obfuscated resume, kind of trying to express who I was and what I wanted to do, and then it got in front of the right people. So that's how that happened.
Mhm.
And yeah, my journey with Cult actually started with a fan project that I did.
Oh,
I wrote a piece on well, reflecting on some volunteer work that I did in high school, and yeah, it was about a nursing home, and yeah, Gabe had a look at it. Uh, Peter seemed to really like the concept, and we took off from there.
nice.
Yeah.
Right, that's fantastic. I know that we've spoken at various other conventions and panels. I know
Mhm.
you have also an interest into Gothic or historic, folkloric aspects and general storytelling.
Yeah.
But what is it that maybe brought you specifically, since Cult is a very horror-focused theme?
Mhm.
What is something that you would say brought you to the horror aspect of story writing?
I was thinking about this before our interview, and I think you can sum up my interest in horror. You can kind of pinpoint it in two places in my life. Um, the first would be kind of during my adolescent period. I had a very up close and personal and drawn out experience with well, with mental illness, with insanity in a close family member.
Mm.
And I think being present for that at at a certain age, it it led me to take an interest in the horror direction. It it was kind of my I don't know, it was a defining trauma, I guess you could call it. So that was one thing. And then I think another thing, and this was probably something that also sort of steered me toward I actually want to write TTRPG material, was kind of hitting an existential crisis at in my early 40s, just kind of and I think that dovetails perfectly with Cult, because I think of Cult as existential horror.
Mhm.
It very much is horror around the question of why do human beings exist and what is our purpose. And I mean, you can go a lot of different directions with that. I think that's why I enjoy both cosmic horror and kind of the existential horror of Cult, is because I mean the two answers you can give, kind of the two edges of the continuum are, we have a purpose, and the other side is we don't have a purpose.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of life is kind of lived in the middle of that. But for me, I like kind of playing with the edges of that continuum. I like um, looking at worlds where human beings have a very definite purpose, and maybe it's obscured for them, or maybe it's somehow something that is difficult to obtain. And I also like looking at worlds where there is no purpose.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Um, I specifically also like the kind of little aspect of Cult where you understand that the true monsters are mostly the humans themselves, and the evolution of your insight throughout a gameplay or a scenario where you realize that the true horror comes from within, which is, yeah, a fantastically grotesque setting and discovery. Maybe speaking about this, you mentioned a bit that the aspects that you like about it. Is there a specific scenario or part of Cult that you would say that that's certainly something that brought you in, beside what you earlier mentioned?
Oh, is there something that specifically brought me into Cult? Well, okay, so this newest edition isn't my first experience with it.
Hmm.
Cult had was something that I remember learning about it and managing to get a hold of a couple of books when I was in university. Initially, I would have been in my early 20s, or maybe just kind of 2021, something like that. I remember the edition of the book that had the black and white cover with the kind of
Second edition. Yeah, it's
yeah, it was
there in the
a
cupboard.
yeah, it was the one that had, I mean, it kind of looked like it kind of looked like somebody on film who was kind of caught in
Hmm.
various positions. Yeah, no, and I remember being very struck by that. I remember being very struck by the kind of the raw quality of the writing and the honesty and the graphicness of the writing.
Hmm.
I don't think it was one of those books for me that I never really. It was one of those games for me that I never really got to play. I think the deepest and darkest that my kind of social group was willing to go at that point was the White Wolf products that were available at that time,
Mm.
Vampire Second Edition and the like. But this was always kind of on the horizon as a possibility, and it was definitely it was definitely present there as a possibility. I liked the idea of if anything, I grew up in a church and religion were always kind of a big part of things for me growing up, and so the absolute kind of heretical quality of being able to play with heaven and hell was something that grabbed me about Cult. It was also there was another game. I want to say it has a European origin, although I'm not familiar with it exactly. In Nomine
Mm.
was another game that kind of grabbed me and took an interest. So I would say that what drew me to Cult was definitely Angels and Demons. Although, I mean, one thing I've really enjoyed about this updated version of it is I feel like you can go in so many different directions. I think Cult really hit its stride with the kind of powered by the apocalypse rule set because
Mm.
now it feels like you can actually maneuver through the very layered and detailed world of Cult.
Hmm.
It feels like you can engage with it far more than previous rule sets that I don't know seemed they were fascinating to me, but they also seemed very Byzantine. and
Yeah.
and we're just not in a frame where kind of my current social group was interested. I think, on the one hand, I think the rule set has worked out better in this version, and I think my part of the world has also caught up to kind of
Hmm.
some of the messages that Cult is trying to express, and is
Yeah.
maybe I definitely find my players are a little bit more ready to hear them now than players of the past.
Yeah, I think especially since in the past it was more a Hellraiser meets a shooting Terminator type explosion action movie thing with a lot of violence and guns and
Yeah,
action pumped, which I think, yeah, for the 90s, it was certainly great. And I mean, we talked with Gunilla and Mikkel about this, that this was just something that back then was so unique that you can kind of go into the gory bits and yeah, fantastical horror fighting thing and kill monsters. And as Mikkel put it, no, everybody likes to kill some Nazis in some of his stories. So, yeah, I think the shift to kind of this personalized horror and the narrative play style with part of the apocalypse certainly kind of fits in the current time scheme quite well.
yeah. No, well, I won't argue that punching Nazis is grand fun, and Yeah, no, my gaming group always makes time for that. And but yeah, no, I definitely think, yeah, the previous editions of Cult that I came across very much felt like, yeah, wasting angels with rocket propelled grenades. It was entertaining, but it felt like it was a very kind of direct line
Hmm. Yep.
between between the supernatural and gun violence. That is something that I kind of, at least in looking at the rules, I felt like that was where you were kind of moved to. This I don't know. This is a lot more. This version of it is. It feels more introspective. It feels more exploratory. It feels more about kind of engaging with the world and these different aspects of it, and finding kind of clever solutions
Hmm. Yep. And
to yeah.
I think that's a perfect segue to a bit maybe now on a deep dive that we want to do. And that is your contribution, which is in Broken Reflection, a collection of
Yeah.
horror starters, as Petter themed them,
Mhm.
that explore the different areas of the cult mythology as well as the deepest aspects of the human soul. They're they supposedly range from 4 to 20 pages, which is
Mhm.
quite a bit of a horror starter, I would say, more than a starter even. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's the writers go from Matthias Fredriksson from Redmond Role Playing, Bridget Jeffries, Gabriel Pellizzaro, Stephen Wall, Matthew Sanderson. The list goes on. It is
Mhm.
a massive contribution and book format that I think we're very excited to play through. Yeah, can you give us a bit of insight what your contribution is? As far as I understood, or what I have here on my notes is that characters find themselves in a liminal borderland where the god of the highway resides.
Yeah, you could say that. That's definitely kind of a very abstract idea of what it's about. My my contribution, I think the title for it as it stands right now is The Crossroads.
Hmm.
And it began in a lot of different places where versus where it ended up. It was one of those something about I really learned about kind of writing for a collection like this is you start with one idea. And I mean, I came to Peter with a handful of ideas that I had, and he said kind of, well, we've got this collection, take this idea and can you shift it to fit this collection? And it ended up very different from where I started. But okay, so my my focus for Crossroads was trucker culture in the United States. That was
Mm.
kind of where it's themed around, and it all really started where I'm the sort of folklore is more than just it's expanded well beyond, I would say, fairy tales and the like. It's not. I mean, folklore has a very specific picture for a lot of people who are outside of the study of it. But I would say that where I reside in folklore is kind of within subculture,
Mm.
and I enjoy looking at subculture, and so as kind of just a start to this, one night I happened to peruse, I want to say it was a Reddit board or maybe it was an actual forum. But yeah, it was truckers discussing the absolute worst truck stop they had ever been to. And that's where I started to take notes and realize that yeah, I could build a story out of this somehow. And I mean, it wasn't and I'm not saying my concept was necessarily original. There are definitely films that focus on the horror of truck stops and places like that. I want to say there's one called lot lizards that is available. I mean, that is actually a that's kind of a defamatory term for sex workers that frequent truck stops, and that was actually one aspect of that culture. There is a good deal written kind of first person about um, sex work at American truck stops, and that led me into other facets of this kind of, again, this liminal space, this in between space. And the other thing that was of interest to me, um, crossroads have an appeal in lots of different um, kind of occult subcultures. There's lots of different stories about what you find at the crossroads. The one that I was most familiar with growing up in the U.S. was the idea that Robert Johnson, the blues guitarist, went to the crossroads and sold his soul to the
So,
devil to
yep.
learn how to play the blues. And I kind of took aspects of that. I took aspects of these trucker forums that I read on, various people kind of filming their lives on the road, um, and what they found at truck stops and everything. And I sort of mashed that together into a story. And this story gives you the opportunity to portray someone who is stuck at the crossroads.
Hmm.
And it kind of the horror starter aspect of it is kind of what is the indecision, what is the desperation that leads you to this place in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
And yeah, at that point, it becomes about kind of exploring this nowhere place and discovering its hidden purpose.
Hmm.
And of course, what that hidden purpose has entailed for you, and facing that down.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, what would you say were you were a bit your challenges when you wrote this? Did you uh, maybe came across something that made it difficult, or um,
Hmm. Well, I would say that the difficulty came because it was originally a different idea when I started.
hmm,
So it was about reshaping the idea in a way that still felt like my idea, but it would fit this other need
hmm,
that the publisher had. I think the whole idea of the horror starter is something that's a little bit different. What that really felt like to me, at least in this example, was kind of carving a wider space for the characters to reside in, for 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 the individual players to come to the table and make a decision about who their character was, as opposed to, say, I mean, if you look at some of the early scenarios that were released for Kult, the fact that you would be handed an identity, essentially, that you would be told,
hmm,
okay, you're the detective in this case, you're the coroner, um, you're the bailiff. That sort of um, that sort of practice. The character is a question mark, so there needs to be a little bit more. There needs to be a little bit more room for the player to develop the character. And definitely, I would say, like, the questions you ask the player at the beginning of the story, and even through maybe like the first act of the story, I mean, they do direct and guide,
hmm,
but you still need to have lots of room, lots of choices, lots of options.
hmm.
And you need to have rewards and challenges based on the options chosen.
Yep. as well as maybe some conflicts, obviously, that down the line
Yeah,
will.
exactly. And that's the other thing. And it's kind of well, I would say if anything, I mean the conflict sort of narrows in that in my horror starter anyway, because
Mhm,
I mean these are characters who are just at the absolute first stage of becoming aware. They
mhm,
they are their power their abilities barely exceed that of an average human being who
mhm.
is stuck in this situation. They maybe have one or two advantages at the most
Okay.
that put them over say a sleeper experiencing this.
Mhm,
Um, and so I mean on the one hand they haven't discovered what their dark secret is. They haven't really that's kind of left to flesh out after the fact. So they kind of have this narrow experience, and if anything, they can maybe tailor their dark secret based on this narrow experience
mhm.
that they collectively share. Those that survive collectively share, um, but but at the same time, it also I don't know. It allows you to kind of play in the dirt in a different way. That's very it's very yeah. It becomes less of a construct. You have less of an agenda coming in. It's more just kind of like kids getting together on the playground and playing and playing an
Mhm.
imagination game. It's just the most awful imagination game you could imagine. So, I mean, that's that. Well, I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure there's more awful ones than this, but this one, I'd like to think this one is pretty bad. I mean, you know,
Fantastic. Uh, how, how many players is this set for?
I would say you could comfortably use up to five. Although, I mean, I think that every GM has their kind of comfort level with it.
Sure.
I would say that I am most comfortable building cult stories that are good for about three players and a
Mhm.
GM. And this is just because I want everybody to have their chance to be in the spotlight.
Yep.
And of course, the more players you have, we're constrained by time. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, you can, but with three players, I feel like three is a very good medium for cult, just because um, you can get some variety, and you also have a lot of opportunity you also have a lot of opportunity for everybody to take that kind of center stage role as much as they want to.
Mhm. Fantastic. And yeah, so maybe as we come to an end here, uh, what would you or how would you summarize was your experience writing for Cult, and maybe can we expect to see more adventures coming soon? Or
Well, okay. I would say that I'm going to be very careful with my words here. So I don't say anything that can't be said aloud just yet. Um, I would say that I found my experience overall with writing for Cult very rewarding. I found one thing that I've really enjoyed about working with Peter and Gabe is I feel like I was very complimented because they told me that they felt I understood what they were doing and wanted to do with the game,
Mhm.
and they and I felt they also understood me and what I wanted to do. Um, as far as future work with the Cult brand, um, yes, I would say that I would say that I very much want to work along those lines. I am working along those lines, and I can't put a timeline on where you would see or on when you can expect to see something new from me. I would say what I'm doing right now is in the draft stages.
Okay.
and that's about what I can say comfortably. Um, in draft stages, and also there are a few people that are playtesting it as well as we go along. Um, as far as what to expect from me, um, well, I think you're gonna see Cult go in some different directions in the
Mm,
future. I think that would be kind of my. I think that you're going to see kind of an expanded Cult universe that that starts to incorporate kind of wider ideas of what this game setting of what the illusion can contain. And I mean, that the other thing that I hope, anyway, this is sort of my hope in like what you would see from me specifically. I hope to be telling some stories that have, I don't know, maybe some stronger political messaging. I want to say that that is kind of, I had a very meaningful encounter with a book by a trans author, by a trans woman named Alison Rumfitt. The book was Tell Me I'm Worthless. And I would say that was a horror novel that was transformative for me,
mhm.
transformative for my perspectives on what horror could do with politics, and so that is definitely an avenue that I want to explore.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, and maybe with a final pointer here, I would like to ask you, are there any final thoughts or advice for aspiring horror writers that you would like to give, who kind of see the new Kickstarter and scenarios coming out and want to write maybe also for cult or for horror scenarios in general?
Yeah, well, it's tough because normally I see myself in that position, as in what advice can you give me? But I mean, if I had to turn around and give any advice at this point, it would be that the the best horror can really kind of come from your own experiences, from your own life.
Hmm.
That's what finally kind of drove me to write horror, was having these experiences in my own life and not really knowing what to do with them and having a way to kind of exercise them.
Hmm.
Um, but also, I mean, the advantage of kind of the human condition and writing horror is there's always something new around the corner that you can write about, that you have, whether it's an experience in your own life, in your own day-to-day life, with your own body, with anything along those lines. There are opportunities. Look for the small opportunities. I would say that,
Hmm.
and especially with Cult is a grandiose setting. It is it is so much bigger than the individual author. Don't feel the need to encompass the entirety of Cult in your writing. I think that can throw you off. I think kind of picking and choosing and following those individual paths, those very human stories,
Hmm.
is where you get the best of Cult. It is this wider setting, but it is the backdrop against which these very human stories are set. And I thoroughly enjoy that aspect of it. I think that's where the best Cult writing comes from, is when you're not focused on the tapestry, you're not focused on the structure of the background, but you're just focused on human beings living their lives
Hmm.
and occasionally bumping into that.
Fantastic. Well, I think that gives us a nice wrap up and a final wonderful words. Thank you
Great.
very much, Stephen Wall, for these insights and personal experiences in your horror writing. Um, just want to ask you again if there's anything you want to mention, plug, or how people can reach you.
Oh, well, as far as reaching out to me, I'm on BlueSky these days. I use my publishing imprint as my kind of online moniker, so it's Delapore Media, Delapore Media. Um, look for the little rat who's contemplating a skull, I want to say. Um, and yeah, I have www.delaporemedia.com, which is my blog. I do have a recent my kind of first publishing piece is actually individually is through the Miskatonic repository for Chaosium. That's a piece called "Somebody Think of the Children," and it is a story of suburban moms taking on teenage vampire horror in the 1990s. Um, so kind of a niche product, but definitely something very meaningful to me, and I thoroughly enjoyed creating it. And that is one thing I've decided for myself is I'm going to write what I love and what intrigues me, and yeah, look for other things along those lines. But yeah, at the same time, I'm somewhat active on BlueSky, and yeah, and then I have my blog as well. And of course, you can also on my blog, if you're a cult fan, you can look for Welcome to the Rest Home, which is
Hmm,
my fan project that kind of got me started.
fantastic.
Yes.
Cool. So thank you very much for those of you who watched this. And if you're standing still on the crossroad and are deciding if you want to back this campaign or not, I would say think about it and maybe strike a deal with the devil because it's certainly worth it. Uh, that's it from us, and we'll get back with another couple of interviews in the next couple of days. So thank you very much and goodbye.